My name is Jacob Crowe, and welcome to the Crow's Perch. Today's story is going to be the finale to Zflocco's and Crispy's Tavern's coverage to user Buana's Burden's story, not another DM movie. Zflocco is covering part 1 of this story, and Crispy is covering part 2. Links to both should be in the description down below if you want to listen to those before diving right into the finale. So without further ado, let's gather up a murder and get right into this story. So there we were, at the ruins of our crumbled dreams. We had the sacred artifact, but no idea what it actually was or how to use it, if it did anything at all. Still with the nebulous objective of put the world fragments back together. So we did what always worked for us before. We kept walking. An uneventful walk later, I mean it. There was maybe 1 or 2 random encounters since we left the first tower. We find ourselves at the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast desert. One of the things I haven't mentioned, but will now, is that our esteemed DM made us roll perception checks for just about anything. Basically, if we were in a new room or area, we made perception checks to learn literally anything about where we were. Passive perception wasn't a thing, nor was getting a description of our general surroundings. Crowe here, this has new DM written all over it. I too have made the mistake of forcing players to make random perception checks for things that were completely obvious and should have been visible to them from the start. Though I admit they are pretty useful in buying yourself some time. I'm looking at you, Matt Mercer. Anyway, back to the story. When in doubt, make us roll perception. So it was here, and it took a roll of 17 for someone to notice the gargantuan sandworms cruising along. Which, to me, is a little absurd given they were the only thing moving for miles, in a flat expanse as far as we could see, and were described as absolutely tremendous in size. Think dune sandworms meets tremors graboids. That's how these things were. Some rocky areas ahead that could serve as shelter, then miles and miles of unending sand. End session. We spent the next week between sessions planning it out. M had found a map on a corpse near a jungle river, and there was some vague evil beyond the desert that we believed to be our goal. We were near enough the rocks for him to make a stone bridge to get across. But what then? Well, I had a plan. We had leveled up, you see. And I had just gained access to Mirage Arcane. I had 1 square mile I could mold to my will, with no restriction on how that square mile was achieved, other than the range of sight. I could have A, fly me up a good ways to get maximum sight over the horizon, which we knew was a flat expanse. A could fly. I don't recall exactly. It might have been his item to replace the useless plate, and make a path a few feet in width, with larger rest stations spaced throughout. I don't remember the exact numbers, but doing this would give me a few thousand miles of path, which lasted 10 days. It was rather power gamey, I'll admit, but it would have let me actually use my damn illusion abilities for once, rather than smashing everything with level 7 lightning bolts and fireballs from my OP staff. The party agreed it was probably our best chance, and maybe took pity on me a little too. Game day comes, sessions start. I formally announce my plan to the group and DM, who is hearing it for the first time. But wait, first there's a cave we should go check out. Good to rest in. Okay, fine. Waiting for us in the cave is an old man at a table with a bunch of food, who attempts to wax poetically about eating the food and becoming trapped. Obviously, absolutely nobody is even close to being tempted to eat after hearing that. But we find we are unable to leave anyway. After some heated discussion that I honestly zoned out for most of, come to find the old man is actually an ancient gold dragon who was dumb enough to get herself trapped in that cave for the last 10,000 years by eating the random food she found in a cave. And now we have met a terrible fate as well, even though we hadn't actually eaten anything. But as luck would have it, we had the very thing she needed to get out. That jewel flower thing we took from the temple? Handed over. Well, no. Why should we? Only the dragon could use the flower, apparently. Us mortals didn't have what it took. Whatever. Fine. Now comes my favorite of the random magic item gifts. DM lays 5 index cards on the table, numbered 1 through 5. We all roll initiative to decide what order we got to pick a card and get the item it has written. But wait, can't we know what they are first? No. Can we just discuss who can pick first rather than arbitrary rolling? No. Fine. Whatever. This was just after Tasha's Cauldron of Everything was released, and each item was one of the magical tattoos in the book. But what if we didn't want to be inked? A, for example, was playing Puriel, a mostly naked barbarian paladin, very devoted to Helm, and obsessed with cleansing evil. What if marking his body went against that religion? Luckily, none of us really cared anymore. I was lucky enough to get the Life Well tattoo, giving me necrotic resistance. A was lucky enough to get the Blood Fury tattoo, which amplified his melee damage. But what if we hadn't? What if I, the furthest thing from a frontline melee fighter I could be, got the melee damage one? Why was this random? No answers were given, nor were flocks at this stage of the game. Another thing about these random gifts of items was that the DM would always be giving us these big grins like, "Yeah, isn't this so cool that you guys are getting these powerful magical items? Isn't that fun? Pretty great, yeah?" Sugar Daddy DM jokes had been made in the past about this. So now the dragon agrees to fly us to the evil. And that plan I had spent all week preparing was for nothing, because it wasn't what the DM wanted us to do. Anyway, Dragon drops us at the base of a hill near a big, evil-looking castle. Suddenly, a human comes running over the hill, tells us there are Cyclops, and to not let them have this item, and dies? I cast Seeming to make us all look like Cyclopes, and with their poor vision, we actually pull it off and they leave us alone. We follow them into a cave where they vanish without a trace, though we manage to uncover their magic door and enter. By the way, Seeming lasts 8 hours. We emerge into a courtyard of a big evil castle, and decide since nobody can cast Meteor Swarm, we should go inside. Inside, we find a stupid amount of Cyclopes, and a mother-flocking lich out of nowhere. Also, the Seeming is gone. First round, I immediately cast Force Cage, which I had taken for just such an occasion. Second round, the Force Cage is gone. Force Cage, for those unfamiliar, is essentially go to horny jail, the spell, a magical prison that is inescapable, except by planar travel, and even then, you have to make a save to teleport. It also cannot be dispelled by dispel magic, and yet the Force Cage was just gone. I immediately protested, bringing up those same points I just wrote here. DM was basically, "Don't worry, bruh. There's a reason." There really wasn't. Apparently N had an anti-magic field ring that had never had any sort of anti-magic properties until this moment. And even though he didn't know it did that, and in his first round he bum-rushed the Lich and got all up in his grill because monks are fast as flock, boy! So, while the rest of us are dealing with the Cyclopes, N is dealing with the Lich, who has a little hand servant or whatever, who kills himself presumably as part of some ritual. It's really unclear, because nothing actually happens. Lich is resistant to most types of damage, until N gets the idea to grapple it, the way his monk was meant to be played instead of the +3 returning hand axes. Run up the wall, and pile drive the Lich repeatedly until it dies to fall damage.
Oh man! Watch it, Randy! Incoming! Randy Orton, top row! Not good! There we go!
Modern problems require modern solutions. Finally, the Lich who, to this day, we know absolutely nothing about, is dead. Suddenly the dragon reappears, kills all of the remaining Cyclopes with her breath weapon, and out of M's pocket with the map jumps the soul of the mother-flocking elf kid, who was dead the whole time apparently. He runs up the Lich's throne, pushes a hidden button, and the throne slides into the center of the room, lights up, and some kind of celestial orrery or something shows a hologram of the broken pieces of the world fit back together. Because I just realized we were playing Star Fox Adventures the whole time. Elf Kid's soul vanishes, and the session just sort of ends. Now, that all happened really quickly. So I asked for a recap since I didn't quite catch it. When he clarified the soul activated the throne, I interjected. Me. Couldn't have been us? DM. What? Me. Couldn't have been us that did the thing that actually finished the campaign? DM. Well, if you had, it would have killed you. Me. Sure? Heroic sacrifice is a thing. Plus, you are the one who says it kills us. You could make it not do that. DM. Yeah, anyway. And then DM's character from the epic level campaign appeared. By the way, DM had joined the group fairly late in that campaign, which was actually 3 campaigns spanning level 1 through 12, then 12 through 20, then 20 through 30. I had run the 12 through 20 part, and had maybe 5 sessions in which he did barely anything. In fact, his druid had at one point burrowed deep underground and cast some sort of hibernation spell, without telling anyone where he was or what he was doing. And when we were getting ready to teleport to wherever he was going next, he got left behind, because we forgot about him and he was in his hole. So that DM had to retcon to where he wasn't in the hole after all. Anyway, this guy appears, gives this big speech about himself and his importance, then flocks off. And then the session just sort of ended. No epilogue. No resolution. Just our pointless characters stuck in that random castle, having not really achieved anything but to be ferrymen for whatever MacGuffin needed transporting to each part of the story. Why don't some DMs just write books instead? Because they'd be shifty books. Yet another startling example of why your game should be a game and not an amateur screenplay you force upon your friends. I'm gonna say this louder for all the DMs in the back. If your campaign can be resolved without the player characters, you did not write a campaign. You have written instead an amateur movie script, and not a good one either. Characters should have agency. Characters should have reasons for doing things beyond just the acceleration of the plot. And their choices should matter, just like when the OP attempted to devise a clever plan using Mirage Arcane, instead of being relegated to being a walking fireball cannon. And while I'm at it, for all the players in the back, circumventing combat should be rewarded. Hell, even if you wanted your game to play out like a movie, isn't it infinitely more fascinating to see how the hero escapes from a dangerous situation, as opposed to how they just, fight it? No one ever says, "Yeah, I love that part in Mad Max Fury Road, where Max just spammed the attack action until all the bad guys died. Oh yeah, I loved when all the D20s flew across the screen." Here's a thought experiment for all you 5th edition GMs out there. Consider why players dislike your fights, or why they end up avoiding cool spells in favor of damage-dealing ones. And try this. Run a game where you don't treat a combat encounter as being separate from any other kind of encounter you'd run in your campaign. I urge you to check out the Angry GM's blog posts about combat, and take a look at how he breaks this down and goes over what he learned from games like Dungeon World, which I've played and would definitely recommend. With all that out of the way, thanks for swinging by on the Perch for the finale of this story, and a special thanks once again for Crispy and Zflocco for this collaboration. If you haven't already, definitely check both of them out, as they upload way more often than I do. So show them both some love, and let them know the Burb sent you. And also, if you liked any of this post discussion, would like to chat more about it, feel free to post your own stories and art on our official Crowe's Perch Discord channel, link in the description. Drop a like if you liked the video, and be sure to subscribe if you want to catch up on the latest RPG horror stories from this channel. Until next time, as the crow flies.